Now is the time for America to chart its course to a green energy future. And we can't do it without clean hydrogen. But it's up to regulators in Washington to establish the right rules that advance clean hydrogen today. Clean hydrogen needs the full extent of the production tax credit to decarbonize heavy industry, create high-skilled jobs, and lead the global energy transition. Get the facts at cleanhydrogentoday.org. Paid for by the Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Energy Association.
This podcast of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs is sponsored by AAA Heating and Air.
The premier HVAC company in the Midlands is growing. Are you a top HVAC technician?
AAA Heating and Air is looking for dedicated applicants to fill their fast-growing service department with top-notch HVAC technicians.
If you're the best, then they want you. If you're ready to stop working and start a career, you can earn up to $100,000 plus a year at AAA Heating and Air.
Quality candidates will have at least 2 years experience and a good driving record. Benefits include top industry salaries, commission on service and unit sales, set call limits, company-provided take-home vehicle and gas card, company-provided cell phone and tablet, health, dental, and vision benefits, 401k retirement plan with company match, and scaled PTO based on length of service.
Contact Roy and Dana Finley at 803-677-1500 or check out their job postings on Facebook or ZipRecruiter.
AAA Air when you need us. AAA Heating and Air.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen, with Chris Clark.
The 2007 South Carolina class was, at that time, 6th in the country and 4th in the SEC. It's just amazing.
Wes Mitchell.
You know, I think if you're South Carolina, you're aiming to at least be at 50%. Then in theory, you're adding talent, you're getting better, you're putting yourself in a position to compete.
And Tyler Head.
It's been a great week for South Carolina. On the recruiting front, still certainly plenty to talk about.
On the home of the Gamecocks, 107.5.
Presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 Game. Tyler, West, and Chris broadcasting live from Firehouse Subs out in Newberry, 1214 Wilson Road. And if you're used to listening to 107.5 The Game on Tuesdays, usually we have the Garnet Trust Hour from 10 to 11. Change things up a little bit this week due to some scheduling things. We are going to be hearing from Jalen Nichols on this week's edition, but that is actually going to be played tomorrow from 10 until 11. He wasn't going to be able to join us out here in Firehouse Subs, so we did move that to tomorrow. But Chris, you did speak with him yesterday, and a lot of exciting things you can get to talk to him about tomorrow.
Yeah, it was a really interesting conversation. So sat down with Jalen yesterday at the station and got a pre-recorded interview with him that we'll be playing tomorrow for a special edition for the Garnet Trust Hour. So yeah, tomorrow at 10 a.m. here on 107.5, like you mentioned, Tyler. Interesting conversation because it was definitely the longest I've ever sat down and talked with Jalen for, 45 minutes to an hour. He's a more quiet, reserved guy. Wes and I were kind of reminiscing a little bit yesterday on his recruitment, because he was even then pretty quiet, didn't do a ton of interviews. Said he had done a little bit of radio before, actually, 1 or 2 radio interviews, I think, even back in high school. But it was a good conversation. I think a lot of really good insight into, just kind of looking back on his recruiting process, looking forward to this season, and then talking a little bit about the process of, getting injured in the spring game and trying to come back from that and what may be in the future. So good conversation with Jalen. I'm looking forward to everybody hearing that tomorrow.
And again, that'll be coming up tomorrow from 10 to 11 for the special edition of the Garnet Trust Hour there.
Thing I remember about Jalen is believe he had a 30 or 31-inch vertical out of high school. Yeah. Which there was a time where I was like, okay, what does that even mean? But that for offensive linemen and a guy that big is a huge sign of just explosiveness. Like, you generate so much force to get that much weight off the ground. A 31-inch vertical for a guy that big is absolutely insane. And there was a lot of people. So South Carolina, Eric Wolford had him committed as an offensive lineman. And I remember schools trying to come in either when he was committed or a heavy Carolina lean
schools started telling him, hey, you can come play defensive line for us. You can come play defensive tackle. And there was a little bit of, I don't know if concern is the word, but there's a little bit of like, all right, do we need to be worried about this at South Carolina, because it was a different little opportunity, a different little spin on the recruiting pitch. So I don't know if he gets the credit for being the super athlete that he truly is for his size.
He kind of talked about the defensive line, his background there, whether or not he thinks he could still play it or could have played it in college. He goes into that a little bit. And another really cool topic we talked about is I'd kind of forgotten he played a lot as a true freshman towards the end of the year, which I'd kind of forgotten about. So he had some really interesting thoughts on that as well. I won't spoil them. You got to tune in and listen.
And mentioning that injury that he's just suffered in the spring game, and we obviously learned a few weeks back that he's going to be out for a significant period of time once the season does get started. And that's such a big X factor with deciding what South Carolina is going to do on the offensive line. Obviously, he brought some guys in from the transfer portal, but still some question marks about what that exactly is going to look like when the season starts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to think, just with Nichols' timeline, if you're being realistic and if you're playing it kind of conservative, which you probably should with a knee injury of that magnitude, I don't think you can count on him this season. Is it possible? In theory, it's possible. It's not likely. And there's never a consensus with an injury like that.
Sure.
You can't ever say, well, a guy will definitely be ready at this time or that time. You can give targets, and even, varying opinions may have different timelines on that. But it does change the equation a lot, because I know we've talked about this a lot before. Last season, South Carolina kind of found the formula down the stretch with moving Jalen Nichols out to left tackle, moving Ja'Kai Moore to left guard. That was the combo they went with starting in the Florida game. Obviously didn't work in that game. Nothing worked in that game. But down the stretch, that's what they went with. And that's what they were projected to go into this season with. You lost 3 offensive linemen that had played a lot of football for you, especially Javon Gwynn and Eric Douglas in the middle. But that was kind of a stabilizing force of knowing, okay, this is what our left side is going to look like. Now that you don't have that, you got to figure some things out there with, who's your starting 5 for sure. Rashawn Lee, Nick Gargiulo, what you wanted to do with them, maybe that changes. Who's your 6th man? Who's your 7th man? It just changes a lot for you on the O-line.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a massive loss for them, because you kind of had 6 guys for 5 spots. I feel like that you felt pretty good about, and that that sort of gave you a little bit of an insurance policy, because you knew that there's going to be injuries on the offensive line. There always is. So that kind of gave you, all right, this is our 6th guy. There are different ways you could have slotted the various guys to get, let's say, Rashawn Lee was your next guy up. There were different ways that whoever went down, Lee would have been the next guy in the game, I think. Whereas now you're starting up, you've already kind of ticked away at your depth. So, I think that's an issue for this team, for me, at least on paper, that they're going to have to solve going into the year. If you had that extra, you had that 6th guy, then I feel like you probably felt like you had some time to bring along your 7th. Then you're looking at bringing along your 8th guy. Whereas now, I think that is huge that they go ahead. Is that a case in Henry? As being kind of next man up? Is that Sidney Fugar? Is that Marquis Anderson? We know Marquis is going to play. I got it. Who's the starting left tackle? Is it Ja'Kai Moore? We asked Beamer during the Welcome Home tour, about left tackle, and he sort of said, hey, it's a competition. He didn't say, hey, it's Ja'Kai Moore. He said it's a competition. So, that kind of caught my attention. But I look at Marquis Anderson, and he is in fantastic shape. And I do think he's an interior guy long term. I think he's a guard. But I do wonder, just looking as athletic as he is and looking at how good of shape as he has gotten himself into, I do wonder, does he end up being a factor for South Carolina at tackle, a position we saw him play in the spring game?
You'll hear this from Jalen tomorrow in more detail, but he is very high on Marquis Anderson. I think he said he's a dude. or some form of that. But I mean, you look at that guy again; he does not look like a freshman. I mean, this is a broader point, but Trovon Ball, Tree Babalade, Marquis Anderson. I mean, the way those guys, Jatavius Shivers. I mean, the way that those guys look, and they'll have different roles. I mean, Marquis is the guy that's put himself in the best spot, I think, to contribute year one, especially being an early enrollee. But the way those guys look like juniors or seniors. I mean, and Jalen even mentioned that too. He's like, yeah, those aren't typical freshmen.
Well, then add in Cam Pringle and Josiah Thompson. Now you're cooking.
Yeah.
And how worrisome are these questions on the offensive line, especially when you're talking about not being super confident in what you have with the running back situation either? We've obviously talked about they still haven't addressed a running back one, at least in the transfer portal, where you're going to have DeCarrion Joyner, you're going to have Mario Anderson, and then Juju McDowell. And while you don't doubt those guys' ability to be running backs, it's certainly not the full room that you wanted to have going into the season. Now you add in the situation with Jalen Nichols on the offensive line, you have question marks there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you say it's dire. Like you have some guys at the O-line position. There's going to be some opportunities for guys to step up and play. The newer freshmen, that's kind of what I call the guys who just got there. I do think it's going to be kind of tough. Like, you can't really expect, like, Tree Babalade to just come in and be a starting type guy at tackle. Like, I don't think that's not even, I think athletically you look at him, you say that's a future potential starter, but you don't put that expectation on those guys year one. Like, that's really just not fair to them, I feel like. So, I don't want to say it's dire. It's not something that you're just like, oh, they have no shot on the O-line. But I think if you're being realistic, if you're being fair to the fans, listening, I think that's something that you got to have in the back of your mind as being a question mark at the very least. I think if you have a dynamic running back who can make things happen, it can erase some issues on the offensive line. Vice versa, if you have solid running backs that aren't necessarily dynamic, but you have a really strong offensive front, you can get things done. Right now, problem with Carolina is you don't necessarily have, at least proven right now,
right.
You can't really say you have either one of those things. You're going to look at this offense and say your strength is Spencer Rattler and then those wide receivers and tight ends, but you have to do enough in the running game to keep everybody honest, to where you can just let Spencer go throw the football.
Well, and the reality is that South Carolina's not going to have Marshawn Lloyd this year. And what did we talk about after several games, more than one game last year? Wow, it just looks a lot different when Marshawn's in the game because he was so dynamic for South Carolina that, he's making guys miss. He's breaking tackles. We went through some of the metrics last year. Marshawn broke X number of tackles in this game or had X number of yards after contact relative to everyone else. There was a big difference. So South Carolina's got some solid guys, or they have some guys with a chance to be good who are maybe not as proven in that position. I mean, DJ Braswell, we like. He has a chance to be good. He has a lot of traits. He has good high school film, but he hasn't taken a snap yet. Right. He hasn't taken an actual padded practice snap either as a South Carolina Gamecock. So DeCarrion Joyner certainly had a good spring. There's high hopes for him. But, how good can he be, in year one actually on the field as a running back? We just don't know yet. So I think when Beamer's asked this question about the offensive line and running backs and the run game in general, we know that area has to get better, particularly with Lloyd not in the picture in these questions. And something that he frequently points to is, we have to get creative. So, we're going to have to give Xavier Legette the football, from the wide receiver position. We're going to have to give Juice Wells the football at the wide receiver position, some of these sweep plays and things like that. We're going to have to utilize the screen game more to these receivers as an extension of the run game. But Wes is right. I mean, you can't be one-dimensional. And so this is one of this team has some known commodities going in to this season if we're looking forward. But there are several questions that they're definitely going to have to get answered, and this is one of them.
And again, that conversation with Jalen Nichols coming up tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for the Garnet Trust Hour. And we are broadcasting live out here at Firehouse Subs in Newberry, 1214 Wilson Road. Still going to be opening up in just about 15 minutes, so certainly come by and see us and enjoy some delicious Firehouse Subs. Tyler, Wes, and Chris broadcasting until noon. Coming up next, we will talk about that top 25 from Pro Football Focus and where South Carolina falls on the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs. Founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
I believe it happened. And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game, an extended version of the show as myself, Tyler, Wes, and Chris broadcasting live here at the Firehouse Subs in Newberry, 1214 Wilson Road. Store about to open up here in a couple of minutes, so certainly come by and see us. Gamecock Larry was informing us of some curses on the Gamecock sports program that have been going on since apparently the 1800s. So I learned a little bit of something new this morning, and always good to hear from Gamecock Larry and have him in person out with us out here at Firehouse Subs in Newberry. I did mention this before we went to the break there, but Pro Football Focus released their top 25 rankings ahead of the 2023 college football season. And, you know, when you talk about these rankings and lists coming up on the season, South Carolina's been hit or miss on being featured in some of these, but Pro Football Focus did put South Carolina in their top 25, slating in at number 22, just behind Washington and just ahead of Mississippi State. And Pro Football Focus does a little bit something different with their rankings. They use something called the ELO ranking metric, which is a simple system that judges teams based off head-to-head performance and results of individual players and matchups. So that looks upon favorably for South Carolina, slating in at number 22.
Let me just say that doesn't sound that simple. Like all these different metrics and analytics we got now are hard for me to understand, Chris. But yeah, I mean, you look at a lot of different rankings that have come out, and a lot of them have had South Carolina right outside of the top 25. Mm-hmm. So PFF, love them or hate them or indifferent, they do have Carolina at 22, like Tyler said. And you know, man, when I was like, quote, just a fan, like, yeah, I would like care about these things. Oh, you know, why are we not? Yeah, disrespect. Now, everybody's got rankings. Doesn't matter at this point. It's something to talk about, you know, which is cool. I love talking season, actually. And, you know, I think Phil Still magazine just came out. Like, these are good signs because it means football is right around the corner. But I think kind of low 20s, like just inside the 25 or just outside the top 25, that's probably fair. And, you know, the funny thing is, Carolina had a back-and-forth bowl game with Notre Dame. I bet you if South Carolina had found a way to hang on and win that game, they probably enter this season top 15. Like, and it would be the same team, same everything else, and they would enter this season top 15 because we tend to, as sports media and fans, put a ton of emphasis on the bowl game. As it is, Carolina did not win the bowl game. They enter, depending on who you look at, in the low 20s or just above 25. And, so according to some metrics, they will start out as a top 25 matchup with North Carolina.
Well, and to your point, Notre Dame, South Carolina's bowl opponent, that ended up squeaking that one out. They are number 11 in this same ranking. And
what would they be if it was?
Yeah. I mean, they'd be like, what, 20?
Probably swapped.
Probably. Yeah, maybe you swap them. Maybe they're 20. But, I mean, Notre Dame last season, what'd they finish? They finished 9-4, and they finished ranked 18th. Does that, I mean, they lose some guys, right? I mean, even with what you return off that team, and they had some very notable losses. Michael Mayer, to the NFL. They lost several guys off that team. I don't know if what they did last season is a top 11, but they finished well. I mean, they had the narrow loss to Southern Cal at the end of the season. They did. They lost to Stanford in the regular season.
Lost their offensive coordinator as well.
They lost their offensive coordinator, Tommy Reese, to Alabama. They did beat Syracuse. They did beat Clemson last year. But, you know, I don't know if that all adds up to top 11. We'll see, but that also illustrates you just don't have any data. You know, I think when you don't have good data. You have some data, but with it being a brand new season, there are so many variables. And especially so let's look at a team like South Carolina, and this is even more the case. I think it's going to be more and more difficult to project, especially just based on an eye test. Like if you're using metrics, that can also be difficult because you're plugging in what somebody did somewhere, plugging it into a totally new team and situation. But now in the transfer portal era, it's probably even tougher, right? So for South Carolina, you may be overvaluing or undervaluing some particular aspect of the team. You know, what we were just talking about, the running back situation. Well, what do you make of that? You can plug into a computer, they lost Marshawn Lloyd and all these things he did. You can anticipate statistically or even with the eye test, hey, they're not going to be as good running the football this year. Maybe that's right. Maybe it's not. You may say they're going to be terrible running the football this year, and it's not as bad as you think statistically or eyeball tests. So I think in the transfer portal era, when you're plugging in new guys onto a team, it can be tough, you know, to try to make sense of that, to try to figure that out. So I think the yelling and the grandstanding about the rankings, we need to wait until maybe, I don't know, a couple games are played until we do that. Right now, I think we can look at it, and I can sit here and say, well, I think Notre Dame is probably a little bit too high. South Carolina's about right. Another one that stands out to me, Wes, is I'm not really sure on Mississippi State. I mean, first-year coach was Zach Arnett. They lost a bunch of guys to the portal. Not really sure what to make of them being number 23. Maybe that ends up being too high. But it's all just a big we'll see. What do you think about, here's a couple, Texas, number 5. So it seems like almost every metric and preseason ranking that we have seen has Texas being back again.
They are back, Chris.
They're back? It's official?
No, I actually think they do. I think they're going to be good this year.
You would think.
Yes.
They should be.
They should be. They should be. They
good.
should be really good this year, I think. You know what caught my attention? Like you said, Mississippi State.
I don't get it.
Top 25.
I don't get it.
And Kentucky 19. Like that
too high for you?
Probably. But also, man, I think once you get past, I don't know where the number is. Once you get past top 5, 6,
big drop off.
Yeah, I think then you probably, I think you could almost have what are the top 25, 30 teams after that top 5, and you could probably throw them, you know, in a bowl and just pull one out, and you could probably pick games that way, and it would be just as accurate as if you picked it by, you know, rankings, like this team would beat this team. Like, I think if you just put them in a bowl and said, go play, any of those teams could probably beat any of the other teams, and actually probably fairly regularly. Like, I think it would be pretty close to being even. I was looking at the FPI, you know, on ESPN to see, because Mississippi State, like, that just jumped off the page. I was like, well, have I missed the boat on them? Like, are they supposed to be this good and I just haven't paid attention? FPI has them at 32 in the country. So that's you know, not bad, but that is certainly actually in football numbers, I feel like a pretty big jump from being inside the top 25. They have Kentucky at 28. So now that said, they have South Carolina at 42, which, you know, that's behind Missouri at 40.
And I think with the FPI, that could go back to what I was just saying, where, you know, I know that that's a formula, and so I like the FPI actually in a lot of instances, but that could be a little bit misleading because now you're getting into the realm of you're just plugging in Marshawn Lloyd's gone, Jaheim Bell's gone, et cetera, and that's very fair. You do have to account for those losses if you're South Carolina because there's some pretty significant ones. But what are you doing to replace it? How is it going to work out? I think that can be a little bit more difficult. Another interesting one, Wes, and you mentioned Joe Milton in a previous segment. I would like to, if we have time during the show today, I'd like to talk about Tennessee a little bit next year. Tennessee top 10, number 9. What to make of them? they have some key losses. They lose Hendon Hooker. They plug in Joe Milton, who has one of the strongest arms probably we've ever seen. But very intriguing team.
Yeah, we can actually jump into talking about Tennessee in that next segment. Before we hit the break, though, I want to remind you about our craft beer passport. Just head on over to 1075thegame.com and click on the Sweet Deals tab, and you can purchase yourself a craft beer passport for just $99. It is a $285 value, good at over 15 different locations around the Midlands. Again, check out 1075thegame.com and click on the Sweet Deals tab for your chance to purchase the craft beer passport. Tyler, Wes, and Chris broadcasting live from Firehouse Subs, 1214 Wilson Road out in Newberry. Going to be out here till noon. The store just opened up, so be sure to come by and see us. Gamecock Larry is here, too. We'll talk about some Tennessee on the other side. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs. Founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
All right, and welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. An extended version of the Takeover Hour today, as we are all broadcasting live from Firehouse Subs, 1214 Wilson Road out in Newberry. Store just opened up, so be sure to come by and see us. We have station merch. We have tickets for Carowinds. We have a signed Ethan Petrie t-shirt for the first person to come in and ask for it. And I was just informed by Josh during the last commercial break, we have a couple pairs of tickets for the home opener against Furman. Now, he's not just going to give them to you. You must come in to the Firehouse Subs, and as you enter the door, you have to announce that you're going to do the rooster crow, and then you do it, and then Josh will give you tickets to the home opener. There are ground rules for this. He's not just giving them away for free. You have to meet the criteria to get these home opener tickets. I think that's fair.
Very fair. Well worth it. You do the rooster crow, Josh will give you the tickets.
Now, he didn't say you had to do it good. You just have to do it. Give it your best.
Make a good attempt.
Give it your best shot.
They can't be puny.
No,
we have a judging panel here.
Just think about any time you're at a game and you hear the crow literally after every play, it seems like they do it. Do your best impression of that.
And I'll tell you, another reason to walk in to this Firehouse Subs, aside from coming in, getting yourself a couple tickets to the home opener if you can do the rooster crow, that smell.
Yes.
It is a very distinctive smell, actually. It smells like bacon. I'm picking up a little bit of ranch.
A lot of different meats.
A lot of different meats. That is the distinctive smell. I know. I just saw it go out. It's right there on the Rapid Rescue rack. A turkey bacon ranch.
Yes,
that's your favorite, Tyler.
It is, and I believe that's sub of the day, which we'll hit on in a little bit. But yes, turkey bacon ranch, Tuesday sub of the day. Very exciting. You guys were talking about Tennessee at the end of that last segment as we were discussing the top 25 that Pro Football Focus put out ahead of the season. And Tennessee is such an intriguing story coming away from last season where they had a lot more success than I think a lot of people were expecting. And obviously their chances for the college football playoff came to an end at Williams-Brice Stadium in the penultimate weekend of the season. But a lot of reason for optimism around the Tennessee program heading into 2023. You obviously lose Hendon Hooker, but Joe Milton, we know, is a good quarterback, and this video making the rounds over the past couple of days of his ridiculous arm strength, which I think we already knew about prior to last season, but it's kind of come to the forefront once again when you see some of the throws he's been making this offseason. They obviously lose Jalen Hyatt, going to have Brew McCoy returning for another year, so this is expected to be another good Tennessee team that South Carolina is going to have to deal with once again, this time going on the road to Neyland this year.
Well, they lose, so they had they had 5 guys drafted, and their top 4 guys were all on offense, and they were all really good players. Now, we know Josh Heupel runs a great offensive system, right? But a couple things just I think you bear in mind when you look at this next version of this Tennessee team. You know, Darnell Wright, who's their offensive tackle, former 5-star player, he was excellent for him. Hendon Hooker, who was a Heisman, a guy who got a lot of Heisman buzz and put up video game numbers during the season. Big losses. Then you look at receiver. So they lose Jalen Hyatt, who obviously had a great year last season. You also lose Cedric Tillman, who I think was probably one of the more underrated players, not only in the conference but in the country. He was an excellent player. He gave South Carolina the lion's share of the problems that they faced in that game last season. They also lose Byron Young, who's a South Carolina native who played on the edge for them. But you lose those guys. You also lose Alex Golesh, who was their offensive coordinator last year. And some people may say, it's Heupel's system. It is, but Golesh, a lot of people in the coaching industry, a lot of people in college football really think that he helped take that offense to the next level because he brought some of the run game concepts from his time at Iowa State, kind of merged them. Now, Tennessee can keep that going, but Golesh did a really, really good job for them, now the head coach at South Florida. And then you look at the quarterback position, the most important on the field. Joe Milton has incredible arm talent, but will he be similar to what Hendon Hooker gave them?
Sure.
Can he be that good? I think this system will help him. His arm talent will, but I think it is a question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm torn. I think we've reached the point this offseason where it seems like Milton, I don't know, maybe this is what the algorithm is feeding me, but I see Milton pop up all the time. Like, I feel like he is the darling of the offseason on Twitter. And, you get it. Like, the big kid, huge arm. I remember when South Carolina was recruiting him a little bit. So, he's an older guy, very mature, I think, very physically mature as well, obviously. And, I think a lot of times at quarterbacks we do let ourselves get enamored with the massive arm strength and kind of forget that there's a million other things that go into that position as far as, variables that are going to make you successful. However, you can't completely overlook the fact that the Hendon Hooker we saw in that Tennessee offense and what they were able to do with him was not in any way, shape, or form the Hendon Hooker we saw at Virginia Tech. They did a fantastic job of maximizing his skill set and ability and putting him in a place to go win. And he didn't even win the job at the beginning. So, I'm not going to count Milton out. We'll see. I'm not completely sold. I'm certainly in wait-and-see mode. However, part of the reason we're talking about him is if you look around the SEC, there's just not quite as many proven guys as there was this time last year. Like the quarterback, the proven QBs going into last season was a very, very long list. This year, just not quite as extensive.
Who is the best returning quarterback in the SEC? Right now,
have to be Jaden Daniels, right?
It doesn't have to be.
I mean, that's what I think off the top of my head.
So,
because there's so much turnover in the entire conference this year.
Well, I think it's an open question, right? Like, there's not. Now, you lose some really good quarterbacks from the league, obviously, from last season. Bryce Young, Hooker, Stetson Bennett, Levis, Anthony Richardson, however you thought those guys should be ranked, they all found varying levels of success, some of them tremendous success. I think you can make a case for KJ Jefferson.
Sure.
Right? I mean, from Arkansas, he's done some really good things. Will Rogers at Mississippi State put up huge numbers under the late Mike Leach. Mississippi State's an interesting team. We were talking about them earlier. Are they ranked too high? Well, one thing you got to consider, not only first-year head coach with Zach Arnett getting promoted, their defensive coordinator, they hired Kevin Barbay, who's got a really good, track record. He's a young, up-and-coming offensive mind, but it's going to look different, than the air raid. So Will Rogers, what can he do? Spencer Rattler's probably up there. I think it's just kind of an open-ended question. Joe Milton probably in that conversation.
Right. And obviously we're hoping that Spencer Rattler ends up being one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC by the end of the season. And obviously when you look at what he did over the last couple games at the end of last year, you certainly have optimism that he can be that. But when you look at his numbers as a whole in 2023, he doesn't quite stack up to what some of the other ones have done. But obviously we hope that momentum carries over into the start of this season.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of these guys that are going to be in the league this year, starters probably are completely unproven. So I think you'd certainly put Spencer above those guys. Where do you put Devin Leary?
Yeah,
in the conversation.
That's a good one.
I mean, there are lots of different, I feel like, opinions you could give that none of them would be wrong.
Yeah,
as far as where they land, and you feel like Georgia, they're probably going to plug in somebody new, and it's going to be somewhat similar to what we've seen. Now, they have a new offense coordinator as well. And, I think that has the potential to hurt them because I think they did a fantastic job scheming last year and being a little bit more of a kind of throw the ball around type team, not just run the football, not traditional. That was not a traditional Georgia offense last year by any means. So, I think that's something to keep an eye on. But, yeah, I mean, just a different conversation at quarterback. It seems like KJ Jefferson, Chris, you mentioned it, but it seems like he gets forgotten all the time.
He does. And
we certainly saw what he did against South Carolina last year. And I think with him, though, it's been more of an it's been more of a situation where, when they've been able to run the football and get him going in that part of the game, he's really, really tough to stop. He hasn't necessarily proven to me, or I think a lot of people, that he can just drop back and throw the ball around and beat you up and down the field that way, the way that maybe a Hendon Hooker or Bryce Young or those guys were able to do last year.
Right. Again, we're broadcasting live today out at Firehouse Subs, 1214 Wilson Road, out in Newberry. Coming up next, going to talk a little bit of Braves baseball as we wrap up the first hour of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. 107.5 The Game.
We were just talking about it. What an aroma when you walk into Firehouse Subs, 1214 Wilson Road in Newberry. I smelled the bacon. I even smelled the ranch, I promise you. Turkey Bacon Ranch is the sub of the day today. $7.99 for a medium, $5.99 for a small. You can come here to 1214 Wilson Road to get it, or you can go to any of the 14 Midlands Firehouse Subs location. There's a sub of the day for every single day of the week. Check out the one closest to you at firehousesubs.com, or you can do like I did, download the app, and you can earn yourself some rewards on your purchases to earn yourself some free Firehouse Subs. Again, that's the sub of the day. Today is one of our favorites here on the GC Takeover Hour. It's the Turkey Bacon Ranch here at Firehouse Subs.
Talk a little bit of Braves coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs.
Hey, it's Chris Mitchell. After 10 years with no dog, we got Walter. I bring him to work with me a couple days a week, but on the days when he's not here, he goes to Ridgeside Canine for puppy daycare. Walter absolutely loves it there, and I know he's in great hands. Clean, spacious, happy. We even see pictures on Facebook of what he's up to. I love that you can have him train your dog while your dog's with him. I can't recommend them enough. Ridgeside Canine Training Facility and Aquatic Center on Gateway Drive in Winchester. That's RidgesideCanineWinchester.com.
Stacking Benjamins with Joe and his good friend OG not only has great financial insight, it's laid back with humor too.
Mr. Len Penzo's here. Now when I buy something, I'm like, can actually spend any time with this thing. Len, I would imagine you've got to think about that too when you're buying stuff.
Before I was retired, if I wanted something, I bought it. I don't care what it was. The Kings were in the Stanley Cup Finals, and me and the Honeybee, I mean, we didn't even think about it. $3,600 on 2 tickets. Now that I'm retired, those days are gone.
The Stacking Benjamin Show, available on YouTube or wherever you listen.
107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs. Founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
That was Brandon Godden on the call last night for Valley Sports as Ronald Acuna Jr. hitting a 2-run homer that would help the Braves to a 4-1 victory over the Minnesota Twins out at Truist Park as the Braves continue their hot streak as one of the best teams in baseball, and obviously had a big weekend series with taking 2 out of 3 against the Reds up there in Cincinnati, and then coming home and picking up the win against the Twins last night. And as we'll talk Braves for a couple minutes here, it's a good time to be a Braves fan as we get to just about the halfway point of the season, and things looking pretty good for them as far as the NL East goes.
Yeah, almost at the halfway point, like you said, which means they are tracking to win over 100 games again, which, if you win 100 games, you are a pretty elite team, and they're actually tracking to win a few more games than that right now. So, they've kind of, that average has been pulled up by the fact the last, 20 games they've won, I don't know what it is now, 17, 18 games, but very impressive. I was looking at this tweet from Hector Gomez from last night. Ronald Acuna right now, first in the NL in runs, total bases, stolen bases, slugging, OPS, and WAR, and second in batting average, hits, extra base hits. Let's see, 8th in home runs, 7th in RBIs, 10th in walks, and 5th in on-base percentage. So having an MVP caliber, certainly first half. There's a reason he's already been best vote getter for the All-Star game. And, man, this team, baseball is a sport. The best team does not always win.
Sure.
The series, obviously. But this certainly feels like a World Series team. They do a little bit of everything. The most impressive thing to me, though, is as many home runs that they have hit, and they have hit a bunch of them. They've hit more than anybody else in the majors. They do not strike out the way they were, the way they did the last few seasons. Like, they have really cut down on the strikeouts, and they can beat you without the home run as well.
And you're talking about home runs there, and while the focus, really revolves around Ronald Acuna, Matt Olson leading Major League Baseball in home runs, hit a couple against the Reds over the weekend, up to 25 on the season now, and I feel like he's kind of flying under the radar despite having that number, and that goes back to just how good this offense has been this entire season.
Yeah, and I think people still try to compare him to Freddie, and completely different hitter than Freddie. Freddie, much better contact hitter, much better gap-to-gap hitter. But Olson, as far as – and he doesn't even look like a power hitter. Like, he's this long, kind of leaner guy. But just, obviously is a great power hitter. It's time we start talking about him as being a great power hitter. And, I guess he's leading the NL right now, I think.
Yes.
And Ohtani is leading the majors, I think, in home runs.
I believe that's correct.
Right now, they've actually kind of gone back and forth, I think.
And Ohtani hit another one last night.
Yeah, Ohtani's in fuego right now. But, yeah, man, but the entire lineup is what's crazy. You got Ozuna doing what he's doing right now. Michael Harris has, recovered from his little slump and has been really outstanding the last month or so. So they are just absolutely loaded, I think, top to bottom in this lineup.
And obviously when you're talking about a team as good as the Braves, you're only as good as your pitching, and Spencer Strider has been such a highlight for this team. He went through a little stretch there for a couple of games where he struggled giving up a lot of hits and a lot of runs, but back to his true form last night, 7 innings pitched, only giving up 3 hits, 1 runs, and 10 strikeouts. And obviously if he continues in this form, he can certainly be one of those guys in the Cy Young conversation by season's end.
Yeah, he's been really good his last 2. I was a little bit concerned about him, to be honest, as velo was down. He was getting squared up a lot more than we're used to seeing. I still don't think he's the crazy thing is he is still not quite pitched to the level we saw. If you look at like the underlying metrics, go to like Baseball Savant and all the expected stats and stuff like that, he's been getting hit hard a little bit more than he did last year. But that just tells you what the expectations are for him, that he can go out, give up 1 run in 7 innings, and you're still saying he could have been even better. Sure. So, I think that just speaks to the tremendous, just insane upside he has. And, these other guys, him, Bryce Elder, they've stepped up when, Fried went down. Kyle Wright has missed a ton of time. Great sign for the Braves, though. Fried now, getting in bullpen work, sort of slowly getting back to the point where he's going to come back. I think he'll be back right after the All-Star break is probably the current projection. And to me, that's the key, though. You put him back at the top of that rotation, and this is definitely a potential World Series team if they can avoid the big injuries.
And you mentioned Bryce Elder. So here's another good tweet with some stats for you. This is from Kevin McAlpin, who is a Braves pregame host on 680 The Fan. So y'all remember that Pete Alonso from the team that nobody likes, the Mets.
Team that's currently 16 games back, by the way.
And you're robbing my stat, Tyler.
No, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's actually not my stat. It's Kevin's stat. Little preview. But remember Pete Alonso on June 6th hit a homer off Bryce Elder and was yelling from the bullpen to throw it again. Well, since that top of the third on June 6th, Kevin points out the Braves have scored 133 runs over their last 18 and a half games, and the Mets have gone at that point they were 6.5 games back, and now, as you said, Tyler, 16 games back. So
yes.
Maybe Bryce Elder would like Pete Alonso to yell from the dugout again. Because it sent them on a backspin and the Braves are rolling.
Things you love to see, and the Mets fell to the Brewers last night up there at home. And, when you look at the NL East, one team to keep an eye on, it's the Marlins. They're 7-3 in their last 10 games, 6.5 games back right now. And a team you didn't really see being much of a contender for the Braves. And obviously they still got a ways to go to eventually catch up to them. But as far as the race of the NL East goes, you have to at least keep your eye on what the Marlins are doing right now.
Yeah, you do. I mean, but gosh, it's hard to, like, it's kind of like Wes said, like, the best team does not always necessarily win, but man,
sure.
if you're handicapping it right now, I mean, certainly at a bare minimum coming out of the NL, the Braves look like the best team, and as I said, I mean, has a chance to get even better. This team has not reached even what its peak could be for the remainder of the year.
And Braves back in action later on today, taking on the Twins in game number 2 of that series. We'll head into a break, come back, and jump into hour number 2 of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hours. You're broadcasting live from Firehouse Subs, 1214 Wilson Road, out here in Newberry, going until noon. Tyler, Wes, and Chris, right here on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen, with Chris Clark.
The 2007 South Carolina class was, at that time, 6th in the country and 4th in the SEC, which is amazing.
Wes Mitchell.
You know, I think if you're South Carolina, you're aiming to at least be at 50%. Then in theory, you're adding talent, you're getting better, you're putting yourself in a position to compete.
And Tyler Head.
It's been a great week for South Carolina. On the recruiting front, still certainly plenty to talk about.
On the home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler, West, and Chris broadcasting live from Firehouse Subs, 1214 Wilson Road, out here in Newberry. Store is a very happening place right now. Gamecock Larry hanging out with us. So we got some station merch. We got tickets to Carowinds. I believe we've already given away one of the pair of tickets to the home opener against Furman, as we did have one of our listeners come in and do the Gamecock Crow as they walked in the store. So we still have another pair of tickets to give away if you want to come in and do that. So plenty to do and talk about. We're finally enjoying some Firehouse Subs here this morning, so plenty is going on. But, guys, I want to get back into the conversation we were having a little bit at the end of the 9 o'clock hour. We did learn yesterday that David Busey has committed to South Carolina after the official visit over the weekend. And this didn't come as much of a surprise, as we kind of knew this was going to be kind of coming sooner rather than later. But, you know, he's listed as the linebacker coming in from Savannah Christian as a 3-star prospect. But the anticipation is that he's going to be used as a safety once he gets here to South Carolina in 2024. What's the development process for a guy like that to make that change going from high school to college?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's obviously a process for anybody, and it's easier for some guys than others. And and sometimes, Chris, I feel like, man, it's kind of hard to even predict which guys are going to have an easy transition and which guys aren't. Like, there's been guys come in, I'm like, oh, this guy will definitely play early. And it's a process. And then there's been other guys that really aren't even on the radar, and they just hit the ground, and they're just like, oh, I belong. Like, even worried last year. Just, you started hearing very, very early, hey, this guy looks the part in workouts. And so it's hard to predict. I think with him, that if you're talking early playing time, special teams probably is the avenue to do that. And, then it's kind of go from there. Now, we've talked about positions where Carolina has a bunch of upperclassmen. We've talked about positions where Carolina has some younger, guys that are, like, already established. I look at safety. That's a spot where you have some guys who are established, at least right now. Now, even worry, he may be a 3-year an NFL guy, so
probably more likely at this point.
Yeah, you would think so. And, so I think for him, special teams, like I said, are the early way to get on the field. But then, who are we to say he can't come in, develop, do things the right way, and then a couple years down the road start getting into that mix at safety or even nickel, a spot that he plays in high school right now, or did it 7-on-7 at least. He's played so many different spots. He's played in space. You don't actually usually see a guy kind of go linebacker to safety. You more see guys go safety to linebacker, grow into that linebacker spot. However, he is very comfortable playing in space already. So I think that probably helps him as a sort of safety nickel with South Carolina.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because I think you kind of carry an expectation of what he'll be able to do. You know, I don't even know, Wes, you may know, does he enroll in January? Is he a summer guy? I'm not sure that we know the answer to that yet, but guys can come in and surprise you. I think there are some players that when they're signed, you immediately think, all right, it's going to be a major surprise if this guy doesn't come in and, you know, make a big impact. You know, Marcus Lattimore was one of those guys. Jadeveon Clowney was one of those guys. So this guy's going to come in and immediately play. Even guys that you really like out of high school, like a Nick Emanwari, is probably the best example, and it's a recent example. You go, well, this guy had 200-something tackles as a senior, which is unheard of at Irmo, and he's got great physical traits, but he's a summer enrollee. Is he going to be able to make that big of an impact? But he did. So, you know, with Busey, I don't know if you carry certainly the physical traits aren't that of like an Emanwari,
sure,
but he has other things that you really like, and maybe that helps him jump in earlier.
And it's so hard for somebody like that because here we are in the summer of 2023. This is somebody that at earliest would be coming in the spring of 2024. It's so hard to project out of what your roster is going to look like with guys currently on the team or guys you might bring in the transfer portal between now and then. So it's all kind of speculation at this point.
Yeah, Sorry, my brain just reset when you said next year was 2024. I was like, God, it really, truly is.
It really is.
Like, that is insane to me. But, yeah, I mean, it is hard to project. But I think, man, like we talked about earlier, a high floor player. And what I mean when you say that, you're talking about floor versus ceiling. A high floor means very little bust potential here. You expect to get something from him. He is going to contribute in some meaningful, positive way, whether that's special teams early on, whether that's growing into a starter, whether that's being, you know, a reserve player. You have to fill out your roster and your locker room and your culture with guys who fit in like this. And I think that's what South Carolina's gotten in David Busey.
So to look big picture, USC on the front end of this 2024 class got several early commitments, and just about all of them highly ranked guys. So it was your Cam Pringles, your Wendell Gregory's, Dante Reno, those types of guys, Mazio Bennett. They all jumped in early, and that led to South Carolina's class being ranked very highly, which it still is. It's still way up there. And the exciting thing about it is that they still have a lot of high-level guys left on the board. It's a lot of the guys that visited this weekend, Dylan Stewart, Daniel Hill, Jonathan Paylor. But they did get into that stage in the summer that was important, and that it was camp season. We're finished with that now here at the end of June. No more camp days this month. But that was the time period where you always say, okay, somebody's going to emerge, and they're probably going to get some big-time commitments, some camp evaluation type guys. Well, that also happened. So David Busey was a guy that the staff saw in the spring they really liked, and they got him in camp for a regular workout day, and then they saw him at 7-on-7, end up getting a commitment from him. Fred Johnson was a camp find. Very first day of camp, June 2nd, they get him. Mason Love is a guy that, you know, Pete Limbo really liked, did extensive research on him. So you're able to get some of these camp evals, and in some ways, guys, I mean, those are just as important, especially for a team like South Carolina. You know, you're not, even as well as they're recruiting, they're not Georgia level of recruiting. They're not drafting 4 and 5 stars and kind of just taking your pick of different guys that everybody wants. South Carolina's definitely leveled up the recruiting. We see that with who they have committed, who they have targeted, that they've got a good shot with. But finding those guys that are camp evals, the players that maybe don't have giant offer lists, and hitting on those, I think, is really important. So that's where you go to hitting on a Fred Johnson is very important. Hitting on David Busey, hitting on Mason Love. We don't know that they've hit on those guys. They look like good evaluations. So I think when we look back at this class in 3 or 4 years, 5 years, it'll be important to look back and say that they hit on those types of guys too.
So we posted this, I think, after we went off the air yesterday, but I had a feeling it was going to get some traction, and it did. But Dante Reno, who has kind of been the face of this class, a little bit. There's other guys, obviously, that have been recruiting really, really hard in this class as well. But he's almost been class spokesperson, I feel like. And Reno, talking to Mike Uva after his official visit, said the month of July is going to be huge. He went on to say it was probably the perfect OV, I'd say. I wouldn't be surprised if we go 100% with the kids who weren't committed within the next couple of months. So he's obviously talking about those 4 guys. You look at Dylan Stewart, look at Daniel Hill, David Busey now in the boat, Jonathan Paylor, and we talked about this yesterday. Can South Carolina go look back and say they went 4 for 4 on this weekend? At this point, the easiest, like the one you would project as the highest percentage, is now official and David Busey. So now you look at those 3 highly recruited guys. Reno, and he's a positive guy. Reno seems to think they're in a solid spot to do so. I think that matches what we've heard. I think Carolina's kind of at the point, man, they've done about everything they can with those guys. Now it's just about those guys go make their individual decisions. And I think we have a feel for where things are, who the biggest competition is, and now you kind of you've played your hand. Now you kind of see what the final result is.
And that's a lot of optimism out of Dante Reno, projecting that you could possibly get all 4 of those guys. We obviously know that Busey is already committed now, but even if you only get 1 more of those guys out of the 4 to commit, that's still pretty good results overall from having them on campus this weekend.
Are Gamecock fans happy with that, though?
No.
I think if you get 2 more, 4 for 4 is like that's the dream.
Sure.
So there's going to be whichever guy in that scenario you missed on, there'll be some hand wringing, clearly. But if you look back on it and you said you got 3 of the 4, somewhat happy with that?
Somewhat. Well, and then I hate to give this answer. Yeah, it probably annoys some people, but it depends. All right, like let's say you miss on Dylan Stewart. Let's say it turns around and South Carolina kind of loses the edge for Dylan Stewart. He ends up signing with, say, Ohio State, who's the other probably main program right now. Well, who do you get at edge? You know, I mean, you need to. Who's kind of the replacement, so to speak? And I mean, it wouldn't even be a replacement. They need more than Dylan Stewart in this class. I think if you had to power rank the level of frustration, disappointment, however you want to classify it, Daniel Hill is probably at the top. I feel like that's the guy that Gamecock fans want the most, because Dylan Stewart is someone that has officially crossed over into, maybe I said a swim meet last night with my kids. Somebody came up and asked about Dylan Stewart. They have a chance to get that kid from D.C., Dylan Stewart. He has crossed over into that territory. But Daniel Hill is the guy, for those that really pay attention closely. The situation at running back. You know that this has been a guy that's named South Carolina's public leader. We know about, honestly, guys, some of the documented misses at running back, as of late. Braswell was a great pickup, but they need more given their senior laden squad, and they need to bring in a couple running backs in this class. They got one in Matt Fuller. I feel like probably Daniel Hill is the biggest target that South Carolina fans don't want to miss on. I could be wrong, but that's my feel for it.
We need an official name though for what Dylan Stewart is at this point as a prospect, because he has entered Nicholas Harbor territory, Jordan Birch territory. Ryan Helinski was in this territory. Clowney, obviously, Lattimore, if you want to go all the way back. But that is everybody. You don't have to be a recruiting person. You don't have to be somebody that follows recruiting. Everybody. The fact you got people asking about Stewart at the swim meet officially puts him. He was already there. I think we already caught that vibe. But that means he's in the mainstream consciousness of South Carolina.
Just mainstream, or you hear a crossover star, they've crossed over into territory. You don't like mainstream?
I mean, I think that's a good descriptor, but I feel like we need a unique word for it.
Well, during the commercial break, y'all can brainstorm what that unique word is.
I think we're going to need way longer than that.
Might need some people on the Firehouse Subs.
Yes, we hope so. 803-404-6100. Also, by the way, guys, this was from way earlier, but I just got to throw it in there. And we're going to give the people the answer on the other side. Do y'all know who the worst team in the country is going into this year, according to the FBI? When we were talking about the top 25 earlier, out of just morbid curiosity, I wanted to see, all right, who's worse than everyone? A little bit of a surprise because I just never think of this team. But does anybody know off the top of their head?
Not off the top of my head.
So we'll tell tell everybody on the other side.
We'll touch on that coming up next. You are listening to the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs, broadcasting live at Firehouse Subs, 1214 Wilson Road, out here in Newberry, right here on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. 107.5 The Game.
Hey, if you want to keep your home but make it smarter, you can hit up our guys, Michael and Nathan, at Integrated Media. Any audio-visual services that you need at home, smart home solutions, complete smart home solutions, 803-948-8327, or Integrated Media Inc., that's INC, integratedmediainc.com. Now, Integrated Media puts your home systems at your fingertips. You can bring your house into the modern age, and you'll be amazed by what your phone can do in controlling all sorts of devices and systems within your house in one integrated system. Everything like lighting, thermostats, sound systems, TVs, security cameras, and your alarm system. You can impress your guests, your neighbors with preset lighting themes. If it's too hot or cold, adjust that from your phone at the touch of a button, even when you're not at home. Complete smart home solutions from the team at Integrated Media. If you need some inspiration photos or some examples of some things they've done for other clients in the past, Facebook or Instagram, Integrated Media Columbia. They do everything from home theater, audio-visual solution, TV installation, security, and cameras, and much more. Complete smart home solutions from Michael, Nathan, and the team at Integrated Media. IntegratedMediaInc.com or 803-948-8327.
Who's at the bottom of the barrel on the Football Power Index? Find out next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5.
Michael J. for Hope for the Warriors. Started back in 2006 at Camp Lejeune. Military families witnessing the effects of war on their loved ones. Now, almost 20 years later, they've aided over 53,000 service members, veterans, and families with confidential, high-quality behavioral health care services at little or no cost to post 9/11 vets and their families. Over 91% of every dollar donated goes directly to the programs. If you're as concerned about our heroes as I am, go to hopeforthewarriors.org.
Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. Presented by Firehouse Subs. Founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
Welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. Tyler, West, and Chris broadcasting live at Firehouse Subs in Newberry, 1214 Wilson Road, going all the way until noon. Gotten the chance to meet several great listeners already, enjoy some delicious Firehouse Subs. In fact, Wes is still currently stuffing his face with one of his new creations over there at the table next to us. But it's been a great morning out here at Firehouse Subs so far. We still have plenty of station merch to give away, ticket to Care Wins. Believe we still have one more pair of tickets for the home opener against Furman. Again, you have to come in and do the Rooster Crow if you want to get those tickets. We're not just going to hand them away. You have to meet the obligations first.
This is easy. This should have already been done. Come in and announce that you're doing the Rooster Crow. Do the Rooster Crow. Josh Yeldman will hand you a pair of tickets. We also, guys, heard, shout out to our friend Bill Anderson, who just came in and visited us. He has a creation of his own, and it was the Smokehouse Beef and Cheddar Brisket, which is an incredible sandwich. He adds pepperoni to it. I got to admit, I never even thought of that concept. I like adding pepperoni to things. That sounds awesome. So come check that out. We're going to be here until noon, but if you can't make it out while we're here, come by afterwards. They got quite the selection here at Firehouse Subs.
Yeah, by the way, shout out to our friend Bill and his son, who is going to be playing ball. We understand at Newberry, playing some football. That also, by the way, Larry Chandler adds bacon to the Smokehouse Beef and Cheddar
bacon
Brisket
just makes
sandwich.
everything better.
So add some bacon, add some pepperoni, add both. I don't know, but yeah.
Why not?
Wes, you teased us before we went into that break there.
I guess I should get the answer.
I can't get mine to load because I'm having some trouble with the internet, but the bottom of the barrel, as far as the FPI goes, that you said might be a little bit surprising to me.
You were trying to cheat?
Oh, I was trying to see what you were.
I wanted to get your natural reaction.
Well, you're going to get it because I couldn't get it to pull up.
I kind of want to take a guess at it.
It's not Vanderbilt. I know we do like to.
It is a Power 5 program.
I wasn't going to go with Vanderbilt.
No.
No? All right. Let me think here. Okay. I've got a random guess.
Okay.
Kent State.
No.
They were actually really good on offense.
They are 123.
I was close. That's not bad, right?
I don't know, like New Mexico, maybe?
No, I might just give you all the answer.
Okay.
This South Carolina has played this team in somewhat recent memory. I don't remember when, but it happened. UMass.
Yeah, they did.
That makes sense.
That was a close game, actually. Like, it ended up being, like, a little bit too close for a while. My other guess was going to be Akron, just randomly. Because South Carolina played Akron that one year, and they were very bad.
They're fourth worst. Wait, did one of y'all say New Mexico?
Yeah, I said New Mexico.
Yeah, they are second to last.
I think they're always bad. Who's the other? Normally,
it's easy to assume they're going to be
Eastern Michigan,
Eastern Illinois. Ooh, that was
one
of the worst. Charleston Southern. Two worst teams I've ever seen South Carolina play: Eastern Illinois and Charleston Southern. No disrespect, but those teams struggled. What was the other team that's? Oh, remember how bad Idaho used to be? Are they still terrible?
Didn't they go down to FCS?
I think they did.
Yeah, they're like. I think they're the first team to ever downgrade to FCS.
They were absolutely.
They're like, we're not about this life.
Yeah.
But am I just stupid? Which I maybe am. Is UMass? So how many teams are there?
I think 133 is the official number now.
Okay.
Did they put them like?
Oh, it skips over 130.
They're so bad that they skipped 131 and 132 and went straight to 133.
They gave them their own category.
None of these are. I was like, is there a tie in here?
Well,
none of them are tied.
Is James Madison? They're making the transition.
Yes.
So are they not counted in that?
You're asking the wrong.
And I think there's one other team that's also making the transition. But I can't remember off the top of my head. So maybe they're not factored in. But if they had 133 listed there, they should still be on the list. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, very weird.
I mentioned Idaho too, and since they have moved last year, they were 7-5 at their level. So shout out Idaho, moving up in the world.
Now, is it Idaho or Idaho State that plays in the Kibbe Dome?
That I don't know, Tyler.
Yes,
sure, both.
Sure,
both do. Hey, did y'all see? I'm taking this totally off track for just a second, which is fine. Tennessee baseball sophomore pitcher Chase Burns has entered the transfer portal. Have y'all seen this?
Interesting.
Been some very interesting transfer portal entries. What is this one?
The portal in baseball?
Just weird, isn't it?
It seems even more weird than football,
which is saying something.
Like I think that if we see some guys in football who kind of on the surface it doesn't make sense for them to leave, like they're starting. You look, Carolina had several guys that match that description. You look at Marshawn, Jordan Birch. Baseball, it seems even stranger as far as guys are like, wait, why would this person leave? Some of these things, especially in a sport that does not have, for a lot of guys, full scholarships, there may be some, hey, I'm going to go out there and pursue NIL opportunities because I'm not getting everything paid for.
Right.
I think you got to remember in baseball that not all scholarship opportunities are created remotely equal. Like there's multiple different kind of tiers to where you may be as far as what's being paid for. So I don't know. Are you out NIL chasing? Are there other reasons? I mean, we've certainly seen. You look at those two teams last night, man. They are heavily bolstered by the portal. Like not just filling in blanks, like filling in big blanks and really big-time spots for those teams.
And Florida, who has, what's their third baseman's name? Colby Halter, who's a really good player. Well, now they're bringing in the guy from Alabama.
Shelton.
Colby Shelton.
Yep.
who by trade is a third baseman, but we'll see where all that works out. But I mean, there's a 20-something home run guy that they're plugging in next year as well. To go back to Chase Burns, who is, you could make a case that he's been one of the best pitchers. If you sat here and said he was the best pitcher in the country last year, people might argue with you, but you can at least make a case for it. But Tony Vitello, head coach at Tennessee, actually spoke to 99.1 John Wilkerson and Vince Ferrara. I guess this was today. And his comments are kind of interesting. I'm not sure what to make of them. He said, the one you asked about is a good case of that one is pretty straightforward. We've known that he would be gone for a while. Be careful about what you read on Twitter. Because, like I said, that one has been pretty straightforward. So, to me, it's not straightforward. I guess I'm out of the loop. I don't really know what that means.
Sometimes, Chris, when you and I write things and we expect people to read between the lines, I feel like we think we know exactly what we wrote. And then we're like, you have to think about this from a fan perspective and give them a little more context to read between the lines. I feel like he thinks we should be able to read between the lines here, and I have no idea where the lines even are. So I don't know what the heck that means.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, don't know if that's, if he's saying it's obvious it's an NIL thing, or because, Tennessee has been very active in the portal too, and they've done a good job, from my understanding, on the NIL front too. I'm going to check out during the break our friends over at VolQuest.com. On 3 Network, see what they have to say about it.
And I'm really glad y'all brought up the transfer portal. I pulled some sound yesterday. Greg Sankey was on the Joel Klatt podcast that they put out yesterday. Had a really good hour-long conversation with Joel Klatt, touching on a number of things. And one thing he talked about was some potential tweaks to the transfer portal that he would like to see. So when we come back on the other side, I want to play some of that audio and get y'all's reaction to that. Again, we're broadcasting live out of Firehouse Subs, 1214 Wilson Road, out here in Newberry, going until noon. It is the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, 107.5 The Game.
Guys, we've been telling everybody about Gold Line Framing and how they can take care of you, and that is still the case. If you've got someone in your life, I've been saying graduates, but I guess we got to put that one to bed. If you have not gotten a graduate in your life a gift yet, then you've fallen very, very behind. But maybe there's a birthday, maybe there's something special going on for a sports fan in your life. Our friends at Gold Line Framing can help you with a very unique, very thoughtful gift, whether there's a jersey, a diploma, maybe a custom artwork or an autograph that you want to get custom framed. They can handle any and all your custom framing needs. Again, that is Gold Line Framing. They're over in West Columbia, South Carolina, 511 12th Street. You can give them a call, 803-739-1337. They are open Tuesday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., and then on Saturdays, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. They're also on Instagram if you want to see a view of some of their great stuff they have going on. They're always posting photos and reels. They're at Gold Line Framing SC. Again, that's at Gold Line Framing SC on Instagram. Go check them out. West Columbia, South Carolina. That is Gold Line Framing.
Greg Sankey's thoughts on the transfer portal coming up next. Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs on 107.
Michael J. for Hope for the Warriors. Started back in 06 at Camp Lejeune. Military families witnessing the effects of war on their loved ones. Now, almost 20 years later, they've aided over 53,000 service members, veterans, and families with confidential, high-quality behavioral health care services at little or no cost to post 9/11 vets and their families. Over 91% of every dollar donated goes directly to the programs. If you're as concerned about our heroes as I am, go to hopeforthewarriors.org.
By the game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen, with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks, 107.5 The Game.
And welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler, Wes, and Chris, broadcasting live, 1214 Wilson Road at the Firehouse Subs in Newberry, as I just finished stuffing my face with an Italian sub during that commercial break, which is delicious, by the way. First one of those that I've had. And again, we have a great spread of Firehouse Subs out here broadcasting live until noon. Still have some station merch to give away, tickets to Carowinds, as well as another pair of tickets to South Carolina's home opener against Furman on September the 9th. But you got to come in and do the Rooster Crow. And if you check out our Instagram page, 1075 The Game, you will see the one of our listeners that came in and already did that a little bit earlier on. But guys, we continue our conversation in regards to the transfer portal. I mentioned that Greg Sankey was on the Joel Klatt podcast yesterday. Talked about a number of things. If you have the time to go and listen to it, it's an hour-long conversation that was really, really good. But one of the things that he talked about that really stuck out to me was the changes that have been made to the transfer portal as of late and some potential tweaks that Greg Sankey himself would like to see. And here is what he had to say yesterday when talking to Joel Klatt about that.
I think on the transfer issue, personally, we went from a 365-day portal to a 60-day portal.
I think that was a
football.
great change.
45 days at the end of the year, of the end of the regular season, then 15 at the end of spring. So I think the portal opens up in now mid-April through. So we're going to have a little bit of discomfort, is the way I like to say it. Mm-hmm. And looking back at what we learned in December and January this year, I think we shortened that 45 days. Not everyone will like that. But what you saw was when the portal opened, the day after bowl placement, so every sport, the day after postseason selection is when the portal opens. The first week or two, it's the exact behavior anticipated. A bunch of people who said, I either don't want to be here, I want more playing time, I didn't make the right choice, I want to be closer on, whatever it is, raised their hand in the portal and said it's time to leave. After that 2 weeks, a lot of stories, anecdotal, admittedly, where you have influencers, if you will, third parties, agents, people that we don't know saying, hey, I got a deal for you if you leave. That's not name, image, and likeness. That's not. Some have described it as bribery. Some have described it as inducements.
Yeah.
That's not what it's supposed to.
And again, that was SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey talking on the Joel Klatt podcast yesterday. A lot to unpack from what he said right there. And again, the full conversation is an hour long if you want to go listen to it on Apple Podcast or the Joel Klatt Podcast YouTube page. But, he specifically talked a little bit there about shortening that window in January where the transfer portal opens up right as soon as the season ends. And again, with the transfer portal has changed so much over these past couple years. What are y'all's thoughts about maybe tweaking that area right after the season ends as far as the transfer window goes?
I think generally they need to tweak something, whether it is the portal window, the recruiting calendar, because we've talked about this before. I mean, you think about that time period. So your high school recruiting, right, because you have the December signing period for high school that was introduced for the 2018 cycle. Overall, it's a good thing to have that. I mean, I like having the early signing period. I'm totally fine with it. Most kids tend to sign then, so there's a lot of activity then. But look at all the different things you have if you're a college staff, if you're an administrator in the month of December. If you make a bowl, you're trying to get your team ready for a bowl game. That shouldn't be a punishment to add that to your plate, right? So you're preparing for a bowl. Your coaches are out on the road because it's a high school recruiting contact period. So you can go out, do in-home visits with prospects, sometimes across the country, sometimes hours away on plane flights. You can have prospects on your own campus for official visits. You also have the transfer portal window. So that's a lot to juggle at once while you're also trying to prepare your current team. So I don't really know. I'm not going to pretend to have the answer of what needs to change, but something should. Now, you also need to have some type of postseason transfer portal window, right? So I'm not really sure how to solve it, but I do know it doesn't seem tenable to keep this going year after year.
Yeah, you have to have some type of portal window.
Yeah.
Like the guys have to be able to transfer. I think the problem is there's not enough time in there to fit it into like a natural spot, because guess what? We are still talking about colleges. So I know we lose sight of class and academics and all this stuff, but you actually have to do it on a window that matches up with your enrollment for that semester at school. So, my first thought when I really didn't think it through at all was, this makes no sense that guys are transferring after the regular season but before the bowls start. However, if you said, all right, we're just going to wait till all the bowls are over, how late? I mean, the bowls go into January now, like the championship does, and now we're going to a 12-team playoff here soon. So guess what? Most schools are actually beginning their next semester by January. So, you got to give time if you're going to transfer. You got to give time for guys to go and actually maybe take a visit here or there, see what else is out there, and then make their decisions. So I kind of came away thinking there really is not a natural window that makes sense. For guys like what if you play for a title and you're gonna hit the transfer portal? Like there's not really much room there.
Yeah,
for you, but
it's like you need all these things you're talking about. I mean, you can't shift bowl season if you're going to keep, especially if you're going to keep the early signing period, which we probably should. Well, you probably need to be able to go visit kids in December. You probably need to bring kids onto your campus, and then you have the postseason transfer portal window, which makes sense. But so you kind of need all those things, but you also need something to change. Probably. I mean, I think there's a good argument for that because it is so much. So this is a difficult thing to solve. Going to the NIL piece, I'm glad that Greg Sankey mentioned agents and people basically floating offers for their clients, things like that. You see this a lot. You even see quote unquote agents who don't even represent the kids. They don't have an agency agreement. They're not actually representing. They just purport to represent somebody, and then if they happen to get some offer, then they're talking to the kids saying, I can do this for you. Come sign up for this. Greg Sankey's right. It's not NIL at that point, but is it semantics? You can call it something different. Should college athletes, maybe that's a debate to have. Should college athletes be able to do that? Or should it just be limited to a certain type of NIL deal? It's just kind of hard to get this thing under control. Again, we've said it in the past, because the NCAA was completely unwilling to give an inch. Greg Sankey mentioned during that same interview with Joel Klatt, basically he admitted that the national standard was if you're a college athlete, if you sign up for that, you can't engage in economic activity. Well, that doesn't seem at its heart very fair, but the NCAA didn't give an inch, and now the floodgates open, and now here we are. So there's a lot of things that they're having to try to go back and fix after the fact, whether it's the recruiting calendar, the portal windows, NIL as a whole, and it's honestly just really hard to do it.
Absolutely. We'll hit our last break, come back, and wrap up today's edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour presented by Firehouse Subs. We are broadcasting live 1214 Wilson Road out in Newberry for a few more minutes before turning things over to Jay and Terry for the halftime show right here on 107.5 The Game.
It's the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour. 107.5 The Game.
All across the country, drivers are reaping the rewards of safer driving with the updated Drive Safe and Save app from State Farm. It has dynamic new features like interactive maps and driving tips that make the pursuit of your discount even easier. You can actually earn up to 30% discounts by downloading the Drive Safe and Save app from State Farm to get started. And to get started on it, you can call or stop by your local State Farm agent's office to help you get signed up. Now, if you're wondering who your local State Farm agent is, it's Amy Mason Cup. That's amymasoncup.com, and our office is right off of the I-26 exit of St. Andrews Road, 612 St. Andrews Road, Suite 4 in Columbia. That's in Ashland Park Plaza. Again, the website is amymasoncup.com. That's amymasoncupp.com, or give her a call, 803-772-5554. When my family was looking to switch and save, we called Amy Mason Cup State Farm, and she took care of the rest. Give her a call or visit her website and ask about the Drive Safe and Save app to help you switch and save on your insurance and earn yourself some discounts with the Drive Safe and Save app. 803-772-5554, amymasoncup.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
We'll wrap up the show at Firehouse Subs coming up next on 107.5 The Game.
The Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs, founded by firemen with Chris Clark, Wes Mitchell, and Tyler Head on your home of the Gamecocks. 107.5 The Game.
And
Welcome back into the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs here on 107.5 The Game. Tyler, Wes, and Chris wrapping things up here at Firehouse Subs, 1214 Wilson Road out here in Newberry. It's been a fun morning. Got to meet a lot of great listeners. I got to meet Gamecock Larry for the first time, so that was awesome. Giving away a lot of station merch, tickets to Carowinds, tickets to the home opener against Furman. It's been a great morning so far, and I believe Wes did some sandwich experimentation as well, so a lot of highlights from today out at Firehouse.
Yeah, we're just adding stuff, subtracting stuff, making monster sandwiches out here. It was fantastic as always. Shout out to Larry Chandler, taking care of us as always. And you met Gamecock Larry. You also learned about the chicken curse for the first time. That is a deep-rooted thing in Gamecock Nation.
Why is every curse rooted somewhere in like the 1890s or the early 1900s? Like every single sports curse seems to originate from them.
I mean, curses were a thing people believed in back then, I guess. I don't know. Gamecock Larry gave me the full book story.
Oh, he's a firm believer in it.
1898, apparently. I mean, he gave those guys a lot of credit. Like, very powerful people that put this curse. But he did tell me how Curtis Fry's women's track and field team broke the curse.
Yep.
But my question was just, how did the curse not stop them from then winning a title?
Yeah.
And he said they were more powerful than the curse. So there you have it.
That's what you have to be, I guess.
That's some powerful women. Because apparently, because the curse for, when did they win the title? I mean, that was a while back now, but that basically meant for 100-something years, the curse persisted in stymieing not all success, but championship-level success for South Carolina.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, here comes Curtis Fry and his women's track team. They must have been a powerful bunch.
Absolutely. Well, how long was the Cubs curse on the World Series? Was it was over 100 years?
Have to get Colin Taylor on the horn.
Yeah,
ask him
definitely
about how they broke that one.
But eventually, you got to be stronger than the curse to overcome it, right?
You do. That was 2002.
I was thinking early 2000s.
It'd be 104 years.
Outdoor track and field for women's.
He said 1898, right?
1898.
Yeah, 104 years.
Yeah.
Shout out to Curtis Fry.
Congrats on retirement as well.
Congrats on retirement. Thanks for breaking the curse. Apparently. We need to get him on.
Maybe we do.
Let's
get some good stories.
Oh, man, we'd have stories for days. We could do a long form. Another long form. We can get him out here for an entire 3-hour show next month. When we
3 hours Garnet Trust Hour. Why not?
Yeah, with Curtis Fry, and ask him, did you believe in the chicken curse? What was your process of breaking it?
Maybe he will have some answers for us. But in all seriousness, appreciate Gamecock Larry coming out. Always good to hear from him and see him. And he was getting on me again. Apparently, I got to update his subscription on Gamecock Central, so they didn't re-up properly. So we hooked Gamecock Larry up. I'll just tell everybody that. Yeah. Hook him up with a subscription. Apparently, it did not renew, so we got to take care of that.
I had to get that taken care of, but I think we're all squared away now. But certainly appreciate Gamecock Larry for coming out and say hello, and certainly appreciate everybody that did come by and hung out, had some sandwiches, and got some station merch as well. That will do it for this edition of the Gamecock Central Takeover Hour, presented by Firehouse Subs. For Wes and Chris, I'm Tyler. We've been broadcasting live out at the Firehouse Subs, 1214 Wilson Road out in Newberry. About to turn things over to Jay and Terry for the halftime show right here on 107.5 The Game.
Michael J. for Hope for the Warriors. Started back in 06 at Camp Lejeune. Military families witnessing the effects of war on their loved ones. Now, almost 20 years later, they've aided over 53,000 service members, veterans, and families with confidential, high-quality behavioral health care services at little or no cost to post 9/11 vets and their families. Over 91% of every dollar donated goes directly to the programs. If you're as concerned about our heroes as I am, go to hopeforthewarriors.org.